Hello, and welcome to our panel discussion on urban mobility and the future of it. How does future travel and transport likely looks like? We will spend the next about 1 hour, let's say, with an open discussion with our two panel guests today, which are Sven Heyen from Share Now and Professor Günter Emberger from the Institute of Transportation of the Technical University of Vienna. They will join us soon. And you are very welcome to use the live chat you see on the site for questions, remarks, and anything you want to share on the topic. And now we will start with a, let's say, short input on climate change and transport. Which is coming now, I hope. Yes, it is. So, what do we mean when we talk about the transport sector? The transport sector is accountable for 1/5 of the global CO2 emissions. And let's say the total CO2 emissions from energy conversion processes are about 21% from 24% originate from the transport sector. Just to have a few numbers, it will get a bit, let's say, more real now. So here we have the global CO2 emissions overall from transport. And as you can see, about, let's say, 75% are from road vehicles, which means also passenger vehicles, but also transporting freight. And then we have each about 10% from aviation and from shipping, and a few percent, but under 5% overall from others, and also from rail included. And so here we have again the numbers. So the entire transport sector accounts for 21% of the total CO2 emissions, and then you have seen 75% of these are from the road transport. So this means that road transport alone, which will be also our main topic today, is accountable for 15% of the total CO2 emissions of the transport sector. So then we have a quite difficult graph, but I will try to make it a bit short. So this is a look in the future. This is a model scenario from a sustainable development scenario. And here we can see that overall it is so they calculated that the CO2 emissions will decrease in the transport sector. And there is a trend towards, let's say, less small passenger cars. So there's a trend towards less passenger cars, and towards bigger and public transportation. But we will still have CO2 emissions from aviation, shipping, and from trucks. And then we have some references prepared for you in case, so thanks back to the references in case you want to have a deeper look into some of the graphs which showed up just quickly. You can have a look here. And now we are going over to our panel discussion with our two panelists today. Hello.
Hello.
Good afternoon. Hello.
Hi. Glad that you are here today. And I would like to give each of you, let's say, about 3 to 5 minutes to give a short introduction of yourself and also which field you are working on and what is your link to climate change and transport. And
Sven, your turn.
Okay, then let me try to share my screen in a second. So you should hopefully be able to see something just now, right? Right. So my name is Sven Heyen. I'm heading the business development and public affairs team at Share Now. I've been part of that since 2014, and I'm mainly responsible for, on the one hand, what is happening in our markets, what is the strategy there, How can we implement car sharing in cities, but also how can we scale it up and work together with both the public affairs side as well as the government, because you can guess that as it's involving individual mobility and transportation, a lot of stakeholders involved. I've done a lot of different topics in the past, but probably the biggest one was merging the two former competitors, Car2Go and Drive Now, into Share Now, which happened roughly 2 years ago. So what is Share Now? We are offering a flexible solution to using cars. So we are the biggest European free-floating operator, and we give you in an app and digital solution freedom to use individual mobility within just a few clicks. This does in the end mean we are giving you an individual vehicle, starting with a minute-based rental up to various days. And with that, you can use it for whatever your needs you would be having. So short-term one would be, I want to meet my friends, which is probably going to happen this weekend first in Berlin, as the weather is quite nice. But also you can go outside for shopping. You can actually get outside of the cities for the weekend, and even going further into vacation times, you can even have the car longer for a summer road trip. The good thing is I do not need to own a car. I can just use it for whatever means I have it, exactly like that. And it's a quite easy and convenient process. And with that, we want to actually show you why we think that makes cities to become more livable. Because as you all know, there's a lot of different topics we are struggling with in general as a society in terms of mobility. There's a general lack of parking spaces, but also a big one is air pollution. There's the vehicle safety, there's the congestion, and so on and so forth. And we have seen over times with various studies, with also a lot of participation and just asking our customers, that we help to resolve and tackle those topics. So our cars are higher utilized than typically your private owned car is. This helps to take out private cars off the road. This helps to free up spaces, while at the same time, it also helps to get people into electric mobility. So roughly 25% of our 10,000 cars is electric cars, and that is sometimes even the first touch point that inhabitants in cities have to electric mobility. So it's fostering really the sustainable approach of shifting the mindset there. And we do see that over time, we have seen it over time, that sustainable is becoming more important for all the cities in the agenda, and we are part of that development. Giving you 2 examples here on a really high note, that is Amsterdam, for example, which was our first electric city starting in 2011 already. And they even plan to ban combustion engines. And we are part of that, let's say, experience collection process, because it does already work when we have infrastructure as of today. Other topic would be the city of Rome, which is going to similar directions. But overall, we now think to make it sure that we can make cities more livable. We are part of the infrastructure in any cities, and the key for that is really that we have sharing economy more valid in this regard. All right.
Thanks. And then we give the word to Mr. Emberger.
Hello, give me a second. Share screen. Hello, everyone. Can you see? You see now my screen? Yes. I also will give a short introduction. As you know, I am from Vienna. I am the head of the Research Center of Transport Planning Traffic Engineering. And here you see our logo. I don't know if you know what it is. Maybe spend some seconds about it. What you see, I will explain it. And I think also when I explain this logo, I will also I will use it to introduce myself and our research focus. What you see here is, you should know that we are also working very international. I have worked in the last 20 or 30 years together with more than 300 research institutions all over the world. And you know, there's a transport problem in the first world, like in Germany or Austria, but there are also some other places around the world. And I have heard today, I learned today, that also some people from Asia will listen to us. And this is just to let you know, this was an action what we have done in 2007 or something in Khon Kaen city in Thailand. And there you see an empty road. and then you see 80 people on bicycles, and then you can see how much space you need in a city when you have as a means of transport bicycles or walking. You need more or less the same space. You can save a lot of space. But what we have done here is also you can also use public transport. So you can get 80 passengers in a bus. And then the next picture on the right side, you see what you do when you use a car instead. And this happens now everywhere around the world, that the car traffic is very popular in cities and also in rural regions. And what we do at the moment is that we export this way of traveling to all countries around the world. Because 15 or 20 years ago, in the past, cycling was very popular in China. Motor scooters were popular in Vietnam and in Thailand, and now these people switch to car, and now we have the congestion there too, with all the problems my colleague Mr. Heyen said here before, and also what Frau Wale said before, so with pollution, noise, and all this stuff. So this is one of the most important problems what we have transport planning and city development is distribution of space. And this is something what we have to learn, what we have to understand, and what we have done wrong in the past 80 to 100 years. We dedicated a lot of space for car traveling, and this is now the problem what we face in all the cities. And what I have seen, what you have shown you here is the traffic flow, but not only the traffic flow is the problem. I think the bigger problem what we also have in cities is parking. Just to give you an idea, this was a wooden frame, and maybe some of you know it. It's called the Gehzeug or walking tool. What my predecessor, Professor Knofler, invented at the institute about 40 years ago, and I had the honor in 1992 that I made the first vehicle here, and here you see it. So we were doing an action in Vienna in front of our institute, and we put this wooden frame in the same size like a golf vehicle, like a small vehicle around him, and he was walking in a city, and all people said this guy is crazy because it was a wooden frame. But as soon as you have a Mercedes star on your vehicle, you're a good guy. You're a very successful guy when you can use a car. So this is some of the topics, and we will discuss it later, that this car is a status symbol, but the most of the time you just sit alone in your car and pollute the rest of your environment. And the next problem what we have is not only when you drive with a car, like Herman did it here in the picture, but the bigger problem is to store your car. And this is completely crazy when you look around, especially in Europe. You buy a car from a company, you pay 40,000 euros for a Mercedes-Benz. You can use any other company, for sure, anyhow. And then you expect that you get the parking place for free in public space in most of the cities. You don't have to pay for it. And 23 hours or more, the car is just waiting around, storing 4 chairs on the public space, and consumes the space. And this is one of the problems what we face today. And I don't know, in Vienna now we have a parking fee more or less in the whole city on all public spaces, but it's very low, I think less than 2 euros in the city center for 1 hour parking. It's nothing. And I don't know what are the other places, but in most of the time you just have this problem of parking fees in the city centers, but on the countryside where you also have public spaces, you don't have any fees. And just walk around with open eyes, then you see you have a house with a garden, and in the garden you have a garage where you normally can store your car, but you don't store it in your garage, because in the garage you have a fridge there, and you have a table there, and you sit there and drink some beers, but you store your car, or you park your car outside in the public space because it's for free. And this is something we have to change in our brains, and this is something where we have to change our habits and how to look at the system. Because if you get the space right, if you have something, if you distribute the space a little bit different in a city, you make it more. You can use this space for cycle lanes. You can use it for trees or something, for shadow. We have the heat island problem now in Europe is coming with the climate change. So this is the new place where we have potential in the city to make it more livable. We have to get rid of the cars on the surface for storing. And just that this is some of our research to make the people aware. They know that the industry is very, very strong. They are not very happy to hear this, but this is the only solution to get the city planning, the city structure right, that people can behave in the right way. And just to make the last two pictures, this was the first picture of Hermann Knoflacher with his walking tour, and 10 years later I also was allowed to drive around on the city streets in Vienna, and then we said, okay, we make this as our logo, and this is where our research center stands for. We put the human being in the middle of our research, and the environment, and not the human being, the walking human being is the most important person, and this is the somehow also the means of transport, which is also in the future the most sustainable one. And I think we will have a lot of discussions later on where we can explore a little bit more. Thank you very much.
Thanks also to you. So now we are opening the discussion. You are very invited, if you're in front of your PC, to put your questions in the live chat, so they will reach us. And there's also, underneath our pictures, you can see where you can put your questions. And we start with some, let's say, general and also big questions to both of you. So first of all, climate change, CO2 emissions, and transport. So what are your ideas to lower CO2 emissions? And let's say there are some smaller questions also in this, which are, like, say, if we aim to zero mobility emissions, how will transportation look like? And let's say, what are your ideas on this? And how will it also change your company or your research or your activities in general? And Sven, if you want to start, and then we can also change, like, say, who is first or second.
I'm happy to start with that. So what we do think is that infrastructure itself is important, but also traffic itself is an ecosphere in the urban area, but also outside the urban area. What is important is, and I think we did just see it quite nicely put in this frame, mobility takes space, mobility also generates emissions and so on. And it needs to be based on use cases in the end. So in the morning when I go to work, I probably should take the bike because it's just me taking there. It's taking less space, but also you do not generate any additional emissions. If I want to go outside for shopping because I need to buy a shelf or something like that, that's probably not going to be that easy with the bike. So there I need to have maybe another means of transportation. But it does not require me to go there by car. I can just go there, buy my stuff, maybe then take the car and take it somewhere else. So really think about you as the consumer, what essential is important and how do you want to use it? Just because I own a car does not mean I need to use it all the time. We as a sharing company think that in the end, and there, Mr. Emberger just put it quite nicely. The cars are underutilized. They are standing on the street the whole day. They are wasting time and money. Better switch into something that is shared, that is used by a lot of different people. Because with that, if you have instead of only one driver, maybe one person sitting there and the rest are passengers, you also can foster additional positive effects out of that. And all in all, like I said, we need to have some kind of partnerships in between cities. And this is definitely concerning transportation. And with that, all in all, you can steer towards even for sustainable models itself, like electric mobility and so on. You do not need to have necessarily a diesel car when you only drive 10 kilometers, right? You can also use it day to day, buy an EV car, and people underestimate, I think, the positive effect of those cars. And then with technical advantage coming in, building up charging infrastructure and so on, it's becoming even more versatile in the end to use it every day.
Okay, thanks. Mr. Emberger, what is your view?
I see, I can agree a little bit with you, but I also have to say, how to say, I have to go back a little bit. In the 80s and 90s, we had the problem that we had a lot of exhaust gases from gasoline cars in the air or on the streets, and then we said one solution could be diesel. So we said, okay, we switch to diesel vehicles because they are very good and so on. Then we realized, okay, diesel have a problem with particulate matters, with the small one, and with CO2. Now we said, okay, so this was the problem at this time. Then we said, okay, now we have the problem with CO2 emissions. And now we say, okay, CO2 emissions, we can reduce it by going to electrification or some other fuels or something like this. So, but I think that's not that. And if we have solved, but what happens if we have solved the CO2 problem? What is the next? And the next problem will be the space in the city and some other things, because if you go for electrification, for example, you maybe solve the local CO2 emissions, but not the global ones. But you open new problems like where do you get the material for the batteries, lithium, and all the rare earths or something like this. The next problem is, for example, in Austria, we have 4 million cars or a little bit more. All of them have 4 tires. And every 4 years, you have to remove the tires are gone because they are in the environment. So we have another problem. So if you go switch to electric vehicles, you still have the problems with the rubber tires in the environment and so on. So we don't solve the problem. So what we are doing is always what I have seen, and I'm now working in the field of transport over the last 30 years, and I have a much longer view on the transport system from 1900 or something like this. We always, or the industry always invented something like an end-of-pipe technology solution. Catalysator for the diesel vehicles. Now for CO2, we are going to electrification, something like this. But we can't solve the problem if we don't change the structures. We have to change the behavior of people, and to change the behavior of people, we have to adapt a little bit the structures. And I think one important thing is in cities are very dense, and we know in the future 60 to 80% will live in the future in cities. So the problem of transport we have to solve are the problems of transport in cities. And then, of course, we have to change the structure in that way that people can behave in a city very sustainable. And sustainable means they consume very few resources. CO2, they consume very few energy, but very less space and other resources. And if you look back, what means of transport are delivering this, then these are the most of them for passenger transport. This is walking and cycling and public transport. And in very few cases, maybe you need a car in the future. And I think these very few cases can be done with shared cars, should be very good, but also maybe with automated vehicles or something like this that deliver something, that you have to go to a hospital or that you have an impaired person or something. But if you go back, then I am brave enough to say that in a city you can reduce the car mobility to less than 8 to 6%. All other trips in cities can be done either with cycling, walking, or a good public transport system, and have to be done. That's very, very important to be sustainable. To reach the 1.5 climate goal, we have to be more or less CO2 neutral in less than 6 years. All over the world, not only in Europe. And when I look what happens, especially in Austria, maybe I don't know in other countries, maybe it's even worse, but in Austria we still invest quite a lot of money in improving our highway network, in road construction and other infrastructure, which is not there, which is not very good for saving energy and going helping people out of their car, say it in this way. And this is the way of this is the main focus of our research institution. We would like to find ways out and help societies coming out of this trap of this trap, always to be car dependent the most of the time. This is, I think, one of the biggest issues in the future.
This was also like our next question. Do we even need cars? And also in urban areas where we have good public transport systems. But maybe Sven has some let's say, do you also have numbers, for example, like how would a city with only shared cars look like, or is this something you envision, or?
Not directly. What is important is, and I'm totally with you on that, is that cities are built for cars as of right now. There's parking spots and so on. There is use cases, and I guess there will always be use cases for cars. The question is, what is the percentage connected to that? Also, societal change. Do I want to own a car because it's a status symbol? I personally don't own one, but my parents do. But for them, it's also just a grown and a learning effect. That's probably going to happen in China and so on, a bit in a different relation, different speed as we have it right now in Europe, right? So there it's also, they maybe want to own a car because it's a different relationship to them. And we need to change here in Europe into our other aspect for that. I think, yes, definitely it needs to be a mix of what we can use and what we shall use on a day-to-day base. And there is a shift for mass transportation, public transportation, whatever it is there for various use cases. You can bridge a lot of the other gaps in individual mobility by bikes and walking. But you also need to take the car sometimes for whatever use cases. I think the right mobility mix is then the key for the future. And there needs to be a gradual shift into more sustainable modes, not only for, and I'm with you on that, going from diesel to electric mobility, but also maybe reducing the noise, maybe improving the safety. But overall, it's, I guess, really the utilization of whatever you're introducing that is what is mattering, right? And autonomous vehicles, whenever they are coming, that's in question a little bit at the moment, right? This will also be a great change, right? Because then I can order to have the car come to my place. I enter the car, it's driving to the place, and then it's going to the next person. Then you may not even have this parking discussions anymore. You may not need to build up charging infrastructure or streets to a certain degree, right?
It's really funny. You really said some very interesting issues. Autonomous vehicles, for example, is very, very interesting because we made some studies that autonomous vehicles, if you have them, then you generate 10 to 15% more car kilometers in a city because of these parking issues, and that they also increase the number of people who can use it. And nobody will use public transport, a tram, for example, or a subway where he has to walk 500 meters to the next station when the car is picking him up or her up in front of the house. So this is really counterproductive. And we made some studies, and I have made a lot of research there. And the next funny thing is, all people are always talking, oh, when autonomous cars are coming, then we have much more capacity and we'll have less accidents because then all the cars are driving with 100 kilometers and they always obey the speed limit, and they can move smoother and so on and so on. I hear this nearly from all the companies all over the world. The fact is that we have already the technology. In every car, we have a GPS system in action that normally in every car, you know how fast the car is driving. And if this car is speeding, you can make a ticket. We have the technology already here in Austria and in Europe. So you can use this technology of GPS, of TomTom. I don't know what brand name you want to hear, but we can use it for a smart road pricing, because say you have to pay more if you drive in a peak hour, then you can use it for a fining, or say you can also reduce the speed if there's a speed limit, so we have no speeding anymore, and you can use it for parking, so that autonomous everywhere. The technology is there, but we don't apply it. So this is the funny thing. We always say we have to spend much more money for automatization and so on, but we have already the technology, but we don't apply it. And this is also one of the problems for the big car companies. Always are not allowing this. They hinder the discussion, in my opinion, that we use the technology which is already there. And this is very, very interesting. So I'm very happy for autonomous cars, but we don't have to wait. We can already now use the technology to get the prices right. We know one of the biggest problems is that people are using a car because they don't pay the full sum of the pollution they create. We have to implement the polluter-pays principle everywhere, and then we have solved a lot of problems.
Okay, so our next point is actually economics, so we can talk a bit more in depth about this. But now we have a question from Eike, and he wants to know, if you want to change from a diesel to an electric vehicle, you might deconstruct a product which hasn't reached the end of lifetime. Has there been calculations that we are actually using more resources this way?
Yes, but I don't know. They exist, yeah, but it's not. That's maybe not the point, because this is a small transition. It's a problem, but it's a transition problem. This will. It's not relevant for the next future of 20 years. But there exist some studies where they have calculated how long should you use it, and after 8 or 9 years, it's better to replace it or something.
Okay.
Sven? I don't know if my colleague, if Sven knows more, but yes.
Yeah, you want to add anything?
Not really. I think there are studies, they are showing something, but I'm with you. It doesn't really show a significant effect from my understanding.
Okay. So now we already started to talk about costs and things. So the question is, how much does it cost to create an infrastructure to make a transition to more sustainable mobility? So you already touched some of the solutions, or the other one thinks this is no solution. So maybe you have some more numbers for us. Or not, you can also say it roughly.
That depends on what exactly is unit economics. Is it buying a bike? Then that's a different price tag than buying a car, obviously. The question is what it is about owning a car instead of using a car for a trip. The same with public transportation. What is the price tag for a trip I'm undertaking, right? And obviously there is a relationship between, on a personal relationship, what am I willing to pay? What is the designated price level between comfort level and the distance I'm going to travel, right? If you talk about biking through the rain for 25 minutes just doesn't feel as nice as sitting in a car. So people are willing to pay for that somehow. The question is, how can you influence that one, right? Just because I have a car standing outside on the street, do I really need to take that one because I'm paying for that? And I'm paying in some cities only for parking for €10 a year or something like that. I don't even are incentivized to actually get rid of the car. And I think that is one of the fundamental problems, actually, that sometimes the unit economics are just way too low. So it doesn't really incentivize a societal change about saving, sustainability, and so on, because something is already there. It's a slow progress. On the other hand, now speaking from a, let's say, business development sharing operator point of view, for us, it's kind of a cost burden that we need to operate cars, we need to participate, we need to pay not only for the cars, but for parking, but for insurance and so on and so forth, right? So how can we offer you as someone living in the city a good solution while taking a look at the business case? That is really a narrow margin in the end. And it needs to fit together, but also once again talking about the ecosphere, what am I willing to pay as a customer? And I think that differs city by city, obviously. It also differs if it is a large city or a smaller city. But yeah, it's a competition on the one hand, but also it's a learned behavior in the end. If I have a car, then I probably incentivize to use that one. And there I need to be educated to actually make a change and are willing to make a change for that one.
Mr. Emberger?
I have to say that I see it a little bit different. You know, it's really interesting, and I'm very happy that I have to be that I can share the podium with Mr. Heyen. You know, we are living and not living. We are working in a completely different field, because you are running a business where you offer some new mobility services which can contribute to certain problems, said in this way, in cities and maybe in rural areas in a first world environment, say it in this way. I'm talking about transport planning and transport systems which are sustainable and should be designed, should be coming to solve the problems of the next 2-3 generations. It's a completely different field. So when you are talking about economics, then you're talking about economics from a company point of view. Sometimes a little bit also from the individual point of view, how people behave. When I'm talking about economy, then I'm talking about these are the costs for society to switch from one infrastructure, say from a car-orientated infrastructure towards a sustainable infrastructure. Or did I also say, okay, because we know that, for example, a car user at the moment pays less than 30%, at least in Austrian figures, of the total costs. Because he doesn't pay a lot for environment, he doesn't pay enough for the accidents, and he doesn't pay for noise and all this stuff. What he is paying at the moment is a little bit for the infrastructure with some very small fees for road pricing. And I know, and then you hear that the mineral tax, the fuel tax is very high in Austria or something like this, and people are always complaining all the time, but still they just pay less than a third of the costs. And this is something but this is not communicated, because you're not allowed to say this most of the time, because people don't want to hear this. Because mobility is something that the mantra over the last 30 years or 50 years is everyone should go from every place at every time for nothing. More or less. You see it when you look at the flights, for example. I don't know, but in Germany it's similar, that you can go to Mallorca for 29 euros for one night and then have some fun there, and you don't pay the CO2 emissions and all the others. And the same is true when you use a car, you also pay just a third of the cost. So what we're doing at the moment is we have implemented a very space-consuming, very environmentally unfriendly transport system, which and this is subsidized by the poor people who cannot afford to fly and not afford to use a car for all the trips, and the environment. And that's the truth. And this is something where we need an open discussion with our politics everywhere and all levels, EU level, but also on the worldwide level.
Okay, I would make a short cut here because we have a lot of questions coming in. And the thing is, I think the question was more aimed like, how do we reconstruct, like, let's say, the infrastructure of a whole city center, for example, because we have a lot of space or parking lots there. What does it cost if we have bike lanes instead, for example, which means, I mean, the space is there. Sometimes it's just to put up a sign to say, okay, use it for that or use it for this. But I mean, there might be bigger construction things to do. This would be the first thing. And then we have 3 more questions. One would be, is there a city in the world where you would say this city has a good and sustainable mobility infrastructure? Or maybe a city which comes the closest to that? I mean, if you have something in your mind, you can also say it now. Then we make the next 2 questions.
I would say, I don't know. I would say you can look a little bit at we are all transport planners. Every one of you knows what are modal split. Mm-hmm. Okay, so I would say you have to look a little bit at the modal split figures around the world, and then you see, because if you have a very high share of walking, cycling, and public transport, then you can imagine that the energy consumption, the resource consumption is very low compared to other cities. This is an very good indicator. And here I can tell you that Vienna is not that bad, because we have less than 30% of car trips in the city of Vienna at the moment. 27 or something, the rest is using public transport. But there are also some other places. I don't know, Freiburg is a good example all the time, what we are looking for. Then I think Paris is getting better at the moment. They're on the right way. When you look a little bit what they are doing there, they're removing the on-street parking. If you go to Tokyo, for example, it's also very interesting. In Tokyo, you will not see any car parking on the public space. You have to pay everywhere for parking. So there are some places, and maybe what you have to look is good examples are always if you look at some old medieval cities. I don't know Germany well enough, but if you go on holiday, you normally go to Vienna or Firenze or all these nice places in Italy, the city centers there, because there's a nice and because there are no cars. I don't know any person who goes to a crossing of two highways and makes their holiday there. You always go to a very nice place where you can relax and where the speed of the transport system is on a human scale. And human scale, I mean, is walking, cycling.
Okay, yeah, there's also a movie actually which shows this. So making cities for people, the human scale, not for cars or any other participants in traffic. The next question would be from MP: when trying to help people out of their cars, how much car punishment and through increased parking costs and rising fuel prices can we do without creating new socio-economic problems? This is a quite difficult one. Sven, do you want to start?
I can try at least. And now I'm putting on my public affairs hat, right? In the end, you can always do two things. Either you punish people or you incentivize people, right? And I think this is a narrow margin. Either you make it too expensive, and there we had actually quite a drastic discussion in German media this week, because one of the candidates for the next election actually suggested that we add an additional tax or increase the tax for fuel prices, right? And it was exactly going the direction that Mr. Emberger just mentioned. People were going quite loud and quite drastically against that argumentation-wise, because mobility seems to be a human right and it needs to be cheap and so on and so forth. So this is always causing discussions, which is okay. The question is really, how can you do it better and how can you involve people? And I think there, and this is my personal opinion and experience, you need to involve people in this discourse. You need to ask for opinions and you need to work on it as a society. Simply introducing an additional fee without giving an additional benefit, for example, or helping you shift to someone else doesn't make sense. If I want to make cars more expensive, this is good, but I also then need to offer maybe additional or better public transportation. You said the example of Tokyo, and this is a quite good one in my experience, because there is a really good public transportation network. I do not need to have a car there to go from point A to point B. There's some other cities where there's a non-existing public transportation. So if I go to an American city, often those cities are completely built by cars in terms of the distances. There is no real buses, there is no trains or whatever, right? So making there a car more expensive, that is going to backfire because people will just not like that, but they also do not have an alternative. So, and they're not talking more about the long-term aspect for traffic planners, from my understanding. The biggest challenge is actual to make this gradual shift of offering alternatives in the end, while at the same time working on the problems we're having right now. Can be that it's making more expensive is helping and supporting that one. But really, if I do not have any alternative, what am I going to do really? It's nice to have a plan to take the train. Where I was growing up, the next train station was 25 kilometers away, right? So that's making it more difficult for me. And there's no bus coming in and so on and so forth. If you change that and make it more attractive, then obviously I'm more than happy to take the train. And that's really a structural change that needs to happen in terms of the infrastructure itself.
Thank you, Sven. I completely agree with you. And you made some really good points. It's really funny. A parking place is always more or less located in front of your house. The next public transport stop is 300 till 25 kilometers away. And this happened in the past. And the funny thing is, because the parking place and the public transport stop are from principle here have the same function. You switch from walking to cycling in a motorized transport system, which is a little bit faster than the human scale. But we treated it in the past completely different. And this is also one of the solutions what we have to think about. So if you make a new settlement or if a reconstruction of a city, I don't know, district or something, then you have to take this into account. And then you say, okay, if I make a new housing settlement, then I put the public transport stop in the center of the housing and the parking lots on the corner of the housing, but at least at the same distance. as the public transport stop is. So we call it equidistance, and we always say that this is very, very important, that we have an equidistance between cars and public transport. This is very, very, very a good place. But we also have to think about one side. We have a problem. At the beginning, I told you we should change our public transport system within the next 6 to 10 years from today till completely carbon dioxide free. We cannot do this. But then we will not reach this 1.5 goal or something like this. Because the structure, what you see outside, the car-friendly structure, we constructed over the last 50, 60, 70 years. And now we know a little bit more, so it will take at least, in my experience, 10 is very optimistic, 20 years to change the structure back that we can behave, which is environmentally friendly. So all the construction things, what you said before, the parking places and convert parking places into green spaces or something like this to cool down the cities. This is really a big problem. And the next problem is, but if we don't do this is also interesting, because then the sea level will rise. And we know that a lot of people are living close to the coastal lines around the world. And if the sea level rises, people have to move from the coastal lines towards the other countries, other places. And I'm really, so you see also the transport system, we are defend here because we want to go by car, and it's very nice and convenient by car. Also is one of the causes for the future migrant streams that they will coming from all over the world to higher places like Germany or Austria. We have the Alps, so we have a lot of space. It's very complicated, and we don't have time, and it's really funny that we still discuss some issues with local politicians. I'm really sorry for that.
Yeah. Okay. There are some more questions. One is, I saw a piece of news that the German Green Party proposed to stop short-haul flights in Germany in the future. Do you think it is necessary to cancel short-haul flights? And there was like an addition also, if we get an example going from Hamburg to Lake Constance, is car sharing the most environmentally friendly option? I think, Sven, maybe you want to start.
Yeah. Is it necessary to cancel those short-term flights? I don't know, and I don't think that. And I'm telling why. This is because of the infrastructure. Being honest, being German and living there for a long time, the train infrastructure is not where it should be when you compare to different countries. The best one in Europe, for my case, is always Switzerland, where it's really easy and convenient. They can just go everywhere by train. Austria, from what I know, is also quite well off. Germany, until fairly recently, going from Berlin to Munich, so really from the north to the south, took you 8 hours. You had to switch trains and so on and so forth. And only 2 years ago, I think, they actually introduced faster traveling. So it's only taking you 5 hours. And now the question is, who is using that train, but also who would have been using the flights in the end? There, once again, it's coming to level of pricing and comfort level in there. So just probably going to repeat myself a little bit from what I said earlier. If you want to get rid of short-term flights, you need to offer an alternative. So there you need to invest in the infrastructure, building up the trains. They can be powered then by green energy and so on. I think that is not really the issue. We're already doing that. But you need to invest in it right now. And that's not only an investment in terms of money, it's also about time, because building up train tracks and so on takes a little bit longer and is a complicated process often. It's just still not there in Germany, at least, and pains me on the one hand, but on the other hand, you need to have some kind of courage to actually make that change, to switch away from investing into motorways and switching into trains is something that should be done, needs to be done. Taking a look at the political discussions and so on, it takes time. It's a democratic process, obviously. There needs to be courage to actually work on the change that you just mentioned, right? Want to tackle the bigger problems, then also need to actively tackle them. And regarding is car sharing the versatile one, it depends on the distance, obviously, right? It depends on if I'm going alone from Berlin to Munich, then car definitely is not the most economic solution. It probably is the train. If I'm traveling with 5 people or something like this, could change. Depends on the distance and so on and so forth, right?
I just can say we have to get the prices right. If for this distance, from the environmental point of view, the train is the best one, then we have to change the structure in this way that people can use it. One thing is that we increase the fee and the fare for flying, because the taxpayer on one side has to pay for the train network, for the deficit of the train network. Taxpayer has to pay for the motorways and for the deficit of the motorways, and the taxpayer has to pay for the environment and for the airports too. I don't know, but in Austria we had the COVID crisis and we have to pay 600 million euros just for one company, and I think Lufthansa was the same. And then we know, and if we really take it serious, that we want to save the world, this is the only problem what we are doing here. We're discussing about the saving the world and not saving Lufthansa. We have to be honest. So we need the discussion how much flight travel is good for society. And I told you before, only 5% of the rich persons of the world are using a plane. And they don't pay the price what they pollute. So this is a subsidy, and this is a political discussion. And I know I also travel very. So I have two hats here on one side. I'm talking as a transport planner. If I'm talking as a car user, I hate cyclists. And if I go by train, I love to fly. Especially if I don't have to pay for my flight ticket, because this is doing the company, you know. I never go on my side on first class business trips, first class trips, because I have to pay them on. But if my company pays for it, I do it. And then you can, then you really think, who is using the planes? The planes are mainly used by politicians going to Brussels or somewhere. And they don't have to pay the price. They get the tickets paid all the time. And then these people decide how we should travel. It's really funny. So we have to make a serious discussion. So what do we want to do? Do we want to have a transport system which is CO2 neutral and which is affordable for everyone, not only for rich in the first world? That's the simple question. And I think this is also the answer. Do we need a flight from Hamburg to, where did you say, Lake Constance? Maybe. But not for everyone. Maybe if you want to transport a heart and they have a transportation there or something, there will be some reasons where you need the fast transport. But the normal person is able to pay also to pay for the train, but also with his own time, because with the time to travel. Because if I really would like to go there, then I pay with my time, and not with some money which I don't have to pay because my company is paying it, and the difference is paid by the environment. There's something wrong. This is the completely wrong understanding of economy and of polluter-pays principle. And we have developed this. The elite in our societies have developed this. And also the not high-ranked people are also now thinking in this way. Oh, it's my right. I have to go once a year for my holiday to Greece. Yes, by plane, but it's not true.
Yeah, so obviously we need new criteria for the pricing of our transport and who can use it, when, and for which price. There are some more questions, and I think just for you too, so I think we will make up to 15 and 20 minutes longer, if that's okay for you.
Sure.
So, one question specifically to Mr. Heyen. Why did Cher now leave North America? Would be one, but then I also want to say the next one, which is from the ISWI team. How do you see the future of electric cars? Because there are also many sustainability problems with the lithium batteries and manufacturing of the cars.
So in regard to North America, On the one hand, we are a company driven by decisions. Without going deeper into that one, it was a strategic decision, but also in terms of the greater scope of things. Like I said, we merged 2 companies back then in 2019, 2020, and merger those things are decided upon at Heyen. So without that, I can go deeper into these details.
And electric cars?
Electric cars in what regards? I saw the question, but I was missing it. Sorry.
Yeah, the question was, how do you see the future of electric cars? Because of also regarding the sustainability issues with the resources you obviously need to build them.
We believe that the future, at least for car sharing and in general, is electric cars, is electric mobility, but the resources are an issue. How do we get the right resources? How do we get lithium? It's not only about the electric cars, also, for example, smartphones and so on. Generally speaking, and I'm not the expert in topics, but there's also a lot of research in alternatives. So like using salt-based batteries, for example. So this could also be the future for that. The question really is, what exactly will we need in the future? So do we need a car that is able to travel a distance of 1,000 kilometers per charge, or is it also sufficient that it's 200 kilometers per charge, for example? And with that, the necessary technology will also change accordingly. But yes, electric mobility is the future for us. That is our understanding. The question is really, how can you make it feasible for society and make it sustainable as possible? So there is some things we still need to do and work on that.
Mr. Emberger, you want to jump in?
I can add something. Yes, of course. I said we really have to take to ask the questions: Are private cars still available in the future? It's very important. I think if we really want to solve seriously the problem of CO2 emissions or space and what I said before, resource consumption, then maybe we don't need any more private cars. So maybe we need some fleets, some shares, some vehicle fleets of shared cars or something like this. And there I agree a little bit, say it in this way. So I agree that if you have vehicle fleets, say for distributing small parcels, city logistics, for example, or say you are taxi or like I don't know, all this, what was it, Müllabfuhr? I don't have the English word at the moment.
Like the garbage collectors. Mm-hmm.
Garbage collectors or something. For this kind of vehicle fleets, I think e-vehicles are very, very useful, but not for private cars, because then we run all in the serious problems of lithium and the lithium batteries, for example, and all the recycling stuff, what we have discussed in advance before. And we also have the problem with the space consumption in cities, with parking lots and so on. And again, they don't solve the problem of tire wear, what I said before. So we have this pollution and the brake dust and so on in the air. And Germany has a problem at the moment now with the air pollution in the cities. So also Austria has this problem, and we have to solve it. And we are the richest countries, and we have this problem. You can imagine, I don't know if you have ever been in China or in Istanbul or in Bangkok or in Beijing or something. They have air pollutions. We don't have air pollutions in Austria. And in Germany, we have a very nice air compared to the air pollution in Beijing, for example. And we are complaining a little bit. And this is mainly based off car traffic, to be honest. Yeah. Industry and car traffic. But it's so we really have to think about this.
So there is one more question on e-scooters. E-scooters are taking over the cities and cause many problems. What regulation would you introduce to ensure everyone's safety, but at the same time guarantee a place for e-scooters? This question is from Ivar. Does any one of you want to start?
I can certainly start because we are discussing with e-scooters, we know their pain points, but also we do see that there's a lot of focus on those colleagues, so to speak. It depends in the end how they're introduced, how they're regulated. Once again, so in Berlin, you may have heard that in the news that the Berlin Senate for Traffic is currently tackling a new mobility law that would regulate sharing economy on its own. So that is us as car sharers, but it's also bike sharing. This would also be scooter sharing. Because they are focusing on the issues. The issue is often that the scooters are standing around if they are not used, and they are standing there in bikes when there's hot zones, so a lot of demand and so on. One solution could be that you introduce some kind of stations, and I think you actually have that in Vienna, if I remember correctly, right? So that at various subway stations, you can at least drop off those scooters and so on. Is that a solution? I do not know. I think it's once again a gradual behavior change that is necessary, that people need to take care about where to drop not only the scooters, or what about the bikes and so on, because this is also some kind of issues. But I think there is a usability of them. There are use cases for those, and they have some kind of existence that they can be used for. Without knowing deeper, is it really necessary to have them or not? I cannot tell that one, but I think you can regulate them okay-ish. You can incentivize usage once again. The question is really how do actually the cities and the municipalities want to do that. And there it's once again a discussion needed instead of just simply applying a regulation and then seeing what happens, but actually do it together and really make it as a thorough thought process for that one.
Okay, Mr. Emberger. And then, let's say we are at the end of our economics part, and afterwards we would go, in the remaining time a bit more into the behavioral change, which is coming with the climate change, mobility change.
I have to say, coming back to the e-scooters, from a transport planning point of view, they are useless. Because what we are doing, besides all the problems my colleague explained before with space and so on and so on, what do we replace? We replace we have made studies that we replace with an e-scooter trip, normally a person who had walked before or had used public transport. So this is one of the serious problems. So we introduce a new means of transport which is more energy consumption, which consumes more energy in the whole system, which brings more energy into the system. And from a sustainable point of view, it's not very useful to do this. The other thing is, okay, some of the other problems that we have, who is using it? These are normally people between, say, 12 to 50 years old, because it's not very nice for elderly people to use it. It's too dangerous. Then where do they use it? They use it most of the time in pavements, because on the roads it's not safe enough, or say it in this way. So this is really interesting, because there's one company you know what I want. There's one business model where some companies make a bargain out of it on the cost of the society. Again, from the security point of view and the safety point of view and all these other things, and they make some money out of it. And we, as a city, you have to deal with it, because I know it's very convenient. Every invention, when you look around the world, is every invention where a human being saves body energy is successful. If you use a car instead of running, you save body energy, but you don't have to pay for it. So it's very successful. If you have a phone, it's energy saving, and therefore it's successful. So if you would be a product manager, you just have to look for what does a human being use his body energy and replace it with a new product, and then you're very successful. And the scooter is something like this. And then you have implemented in cities, and all cities around the world face the same problems now with them. And from a transport, I said, I just repeat it, then I stop. From a transport planning point of view, they are not helpful in any city.
Okay, clear opinion on that. Then we have our last question on the economic side, which is from Natasha. Is it possible to make public transport more accessible financially speaking? Mr. Emberger, you want to start?
I don't. From which point of view? I don't got the question.
I think it's about, as I understand it, about the criteria of pricing. Like, how do we make public transport more attractive to people in a financial?
I just can talk from Europe, or say from Austria. The price is not a big issue. In Vienna, for example, so at least in Austria, the price is not relevant anymore. The yearly ticket for the public transport system in Vienna is 365 euros, €1 per day. And you can use all the public transport in Vienna with this price, €1 per day. And we have intervals between 3 to 5 minutes in the peak time and 7 minutes in off-peak times. So this is no problem anymore. And still, 27% of people are using the car. So the price is not relevant anymore. And there exist some places around, I think, Liechtenstein, Luxembourg, or some other places, Tallinn, they have already public transport for free, and still people don't use it because other criteria are very important. So as I told you before, the location of the stops are very important. As long as you can park your car in front of your house and the public transport stop is 50 minutes away, you can also make the public transport for free. People will just use the car.
Yeah. Mr. Heyen, you want to add something, or?
No, I think from the private perspective, you're totally right. The other thing is, and there I interpret the question a little bit differently, right? How can you make public transportation feasible from a operator perspective, right? The public transport operator, and this costs money. Investment costs money. Buying one of the bigger tubes, trains, whatever costs money, and the money needs to be spent. We're directly tackling the issue again about politicians willing to spend that money, right? It's a societal decision. But also, would you be willing as a private person to pay €10 for a trip with the subway, or is the magical point €1? Is it making it for free? Probably not. We just heard. There are some cases where public transport is for free and people still do not use that. And it needs to fit together on the one hand. Do you want to have a business case as an operator coming out of that? Then you need to ask for a lot of money. Asking for a lot of money per ticket probably is not going to help the people just take the train station or whatever it is, right?
Okay, there is a specification from Natasha. She wanted to say, if you have like traffic from one city to another, it's not like in one city where you use the city center and can use everything for a very low price, but let's say, for example, Hamburg, Stuttgart by train.
In this regard, is definitely one of the deciding points, the price factor. If I can take a short-term plane ticket for €29 and I need to pay €225 for the same distance, then obviously it is a decision I need to take. And there, I can speak for myself, the sustainable and economical decision are 2 points you need to discuss, because probably it's not only me, it's also then my wife taking the train and so on. This adds up. I think then it's a matter of salary and so on and so forth, right? So make it more attractive, make it cheaper, or make the other one more expensive again. So there it's really a price tag on it again.
I completely agree with you. I think we said this also before. So if we really take it serious, the politicians take it really serious, that we should behave in a sustainable resource to save resources or something, then the pricing regime must be corrected. So it could not be that the train ticket, you spend more time in a train compared to going by car or by plane, and then you have to pay more going by car or plane. I think there's something wrong. These are prices which can be influenced by the politicians, I would say, and should be influenced by the politicians.
Okay, thanks. Then we have our, let's say, last big topic for today. And it is not something which comes out of the blue. You already mentioned a few points about the, let's say, behavioral change which needs to happen. And like make let's say, some questions one after the other, and then you can, see which one you want to answer first. So, like the question is, how do we make sustainable solutions more convenient? How do we bring more people into using it? And like, what are our target groups here? And how do we make it possible to, get more people involved? And also, how do we do this worldwide? Because it's not just about our European whatever area, it's about the world. And also, like, climate change is also something global which needs to be tackled by everyone. How do we make this happen? Or what do you think about that?
You're asking a question. If you knew the answer, then we would not sit here. So we have already solved all the problems.
At least you could tell us the answer.
Yeah, but we don't know. No, I said we have to change the structure in that way that people can behave in the right way, and that really means that we have to make the cities rebuild the cities back to a human scale, so that people really want to walk. I don't know how it was in Germany, but in Austria, a lot of people in the COVID crisis, they started to walk, and now they also saw that the surroundings are very nice somehow at the neighborhoods. But they also recognize, but they also saw that some of the neighborhoods not that nice. So they came up with pop-up cyclings, but they also came up with pop-up parks, for example, that people can sit outside or something. So they really thought, okay, we need some green back in the city, so that you can spend some time there and you don't have to travel all the time. Because traveling, or the wish to travel, is somehow a deficit on the place where you live. Because you're missing something. You're missing your friends, you're missing your shopping environment, you're missing culture there, or something like this, green or something. So, and if you have a deficit there, then you want to travel. And this is really, it's really one of an indicator. When a lot of people moving out of a city every weekend, then you know, as a city planner, you have done something wrong. It's a very good indicator. And there we have to go back. And I always tell my students, go to a city and feel the quality of a city with your own body, because it's very hard to describe. You can't measure quality. You just can experience it. So, and trust your own feelings. If you feel comfortable somewhere, then the city has a human scale. And if you don't feel comfortable, if you just want to go away, then there's something wrong. And this is something what we have to bring back to our students and to teach them, that they have to trust their own feelings. This is, I think, very, very important. You have most of the decisions are made by your stomach, at least. And then you try to make it rational, but sorry.
I think you had a really good point in terms of the Corona crisis, right? Maybe one of the only good things involving that is that actually people did indeed go further outside, that they experienced their cities differently, but also that there is, let's say, more willingness to do things on a short notice, especially once again on the political side. We had the topics briefly about pop-up bike lanes, about regulatory changes, and so on. I think the bureaucracy as well as the political side have made decisions faster than they did in the past. I hope this is continuing going forward, because with that you can actually structure things faster than it is or has been done in the past. Essentially reaching those points that you mentioned. If you want to reach the climate change goals and so on, you need to work right now on that one, which takes courage. On the other hand, and I think they're not only about stomach feeling, but also about how simple it is to use products, how simple it is to use transportation and so on. If it is really a pain for me to use whatever it is there, even if it's most ecological one or the most sustainable one. I'm still human. I still want to do what is feeling good and quite well. And there it needs to be easy, needs to be convenient, needs to be also reliable. I think this is also one of the points. And whatever solution we are building, this needs to be addressed. And also speaking, this is one of the targets that we are doing as a company. The user is in mind, the consumer is in mind, but this is only us. Everyone else needs also to be implemented. And then you had a valid point, cities needs to change. There's some activities like building up residential quarter, where not the cars in the focus, but really you want to stay in the quarter, you want to experience something nice out of that. And from my rudimentary understanding, this is going to be more and more important going forward to have those society change that is necessary for improving life and improving then also climate, whatever is connected to that.
Okay, thanks a lot. I will try to make a summary, but you are invited to make some additions and changes, of course. So as I understood, and I'm not an expert in transport and everything, it's all about, let's say, about space and distribution, and also about the mobility mix and the diversification you allow. And of course, we or everyone needs to create alternatives so people can use them. And of course, the future is in sharing, but we also need to decrease, let's say, of course, the number of cars and focus more on human beings, for example, in urban areas, which will be more and more populated also in the future. And it's about reachability and simplicity of the solutions, and whether people can easily use them in their daily life or whether it is really difficult for them to do that. And of course, we talked a lot about the pricing. So therefore, we also need new criteria, which are more based on environmental and also social implications, and not only on, let's say, money and who is, creating the scene right now. It's about thinking forward and what do people need in the future? What do we need in the future? So this would be my conclusion, but I would be really curious to find out what yours was or what you say about the session. And I would say, Mr. Emberger, you want to start?
Yeah, first of all, I would like to thank you very much for this very interesting discussion. I don't know how many people are listening to this discussion, but I enjoyed very much your questions. Thank you very much for that. I said we have to start an open discussion in the future, how much mobility we would need and in which form we need it. And I have a strong feeling, because of my research career over the last 30 years, that I would say sustainability is on foot. I think this is my last statement.
And I can only add on that on the one hand, thanks everyone. Thanks also to both of you for having this great opportunity and having this great input-output discussion. It's kind of interesting to see that we having a short-term focus, you having a longer-term focus, Mr. Emberger, in that regards, that is still about sustainability, about change and so on, and that's still going the same direction, but maybe from different angles. On the other hand, and that's more probably my personal message to you as the listeners, have yourself the courage to actually drive the change, right? Think about how you want to go from point A to point B, what does make sense and not make sense, but also question yourself, is it sometimes not about your own convenience, or is it about the future, as we have heard today? That is the only way of changing the future for our future generations in itself, right?
Thanks a lot to both of you and all the people who listened and took part with a lot of questions. And a small sad news in the end, there will be no keynote speech tomorrow, but I think you have plenty of things to think and talk about, so I hope this is not bothering you too much. So now we finished the panel discussion, and have a good evening.
Okay, thank you very much, you too.
Thank you very much. Bye-bye.
Bye.